I am Kat Newport. I am a conflict to growth architect, change navigator, and founder of Oculus Inc. I have decades of experience. Gosh, that's hard to say. Decades of experience in quality assurance, risk management, change management, and organizational development. I am currently an entrepreneur offering individuals and small to medium sized businesses coaching, consulting, and training to drive creativity, innovation, and organizational growth. Those the alphabet soup behind my name. I am an associate certified coach with ICF and a certified change practitioner with ProSci, among other things, but there's only so much I can get on a screen. And I am dedicated to a vibrant and authentic leadership style. This is a lunch and learn. Feel free to keep your camera off if you so choose. A nibble on your lunch during the presentation. There will be no interactivity for about half an hour, but I will open up the floor to questions and conversations at the end if you do have any of that. So without further ado, jumping into my first slide. If it works, it worked. Yay. Okay. So, to access your complimentary handout on fostering a guilt-free, unapologetic, and kind lifestyle, simply scan the QR code displayed on your screen right now and provide your information for immediate access to that handout. I will leave it up there, and this is the only time you're going to see it, so I'll pause a little bit to give you a mo. Today's exploration is going to center around the theme of living in harmony with our values, the guiding principles that emanate from our experiences and shape our behavior, paving the way for a more guilt-free, unapologetic, and kind life, a life that is lived in authenticity. So we'll do a quick walk today through unveiling your values, identifying those guiding values, the compass influencing your behavior and rooted in your experiences and beliefs, reflecting on the values that hold significance to you. We'll be looking at crafting and upholding strong boundaries. We only have half an hour. I could do days on this. But we'll start talking about boundaries a little bit, exploring the importance of establishing and maintaining boundaries as essential elements that need to align with your values. How those boundaries and values anchor themselves in guilt-free living, delving into the connection between establishing boundaries aligned with your values and the journey towards guilt-free living. And finally, asserting those boundaries with an unapologetic kindness. That's right, kindness. Examining the art and standing firm in your boundaries while infusing them with that unapologetic kindness or empathy. So, at the end, we'll summarize some key takeaways and insights. You'll also find those on the handout. Those key takeaways will come from various parts of the presentation. We'll reiterate the importance of integrating these principles into our day-to-day lives, both personally and professionally, for a more purposeful and authentic existence. So I am trusting everybody has their handout if they want it. And I'm going to jump to my next slide. Staying true to your values. So values are like your inner compass, guiding you in making choices and actions that reflect what you believe in. They come from different places, your life experiences, what you find important, the people around us, how we were raised. So they all kind of get into this big soup to form your values that are unique to you as an individual. So looking at the what and where squares on the board, excuse me, let's kick things off by understanding what values really are. Values are like the things that matter most to you in life. And I don't mean the fancy car or the diamond tennis bracelet. We're talking about qualities here. It could be honesty, kindness, or anything else that feels really deeply important. So I encourage you to take a moment here and think about what principles you genuinely hold dear. If you're struggling to pinpoint what your values are, think about how you respond in different situations. Your reactions can be a clue to what values are important to you. For example, if you get really angry, like furious when someone lies to you, honesty might be a core value. So that emotional reaction might be pointing you towards a core value. If your love language is giving gifts to someone else, Perhaps sharing or collaboration is a core value, something you hold dear. So, how you live your life can sometimes point you in the direction of what your core values are. So, figuring out what your core values are and where they show up in your life is important to then align all of your actions to the best of your abilities. Life is dynamic. Once you've identified those values, your next step is to live in alignment with them. While you may hold some values as important, sometimes we're not living life where that value is demonstrated as being super important. For example, believing in open and direct communication, being important to your relationships, and then gossiping to maintain emotional relief for a conflict with your partner. We have a value, but we might not be living up to what that value is. You might see a tension between what your values are and how you live them out. So it's about making conscious choices, acting versus reacting, conscious choices, and taking actions that resonate with your deeply held beliefs. When you align your actions with your values, it's creating a life that feels true to yourself. It adds meaningful direction to your journey through authentic living. Another example. So let's make this a little more tangible here. So imagine kindness is something really important to you. Living in line with this values means being thoughtful in your interactions with other people, helping others where you can, and creating a positive environment around you. By doing these things, you're not only staying true to your values, but also contributing to a kinder and more supportive community. One thing you might be noticing as I sit here talking about values and living values, your values are lived in conjunction with other people. It is lived in community. It's not me, my values, and nothing else really matters. They do exist in that social structure, in that social setting, which can make things a little bit trickier because, there's a lot of folks around there. Facing the challenges. So we're on to the final block on this slide, our muscles there. Facing challenges with your values. Living with values might not always be smooth sailing. When faced with challenges to your values, there are some strategies you can pull out of the hat to try and make it a little smoother. Number one, admit that it's okay to find it hard sometimes. I know this sounds silly. Just press pause. The feelings are okay. We're not perfect. Acknowledging that you're struggling, acknowledging that difficulty is oftentimes the first step of finding the next way, the door out of the difficult situation. Number two, social networks are super important. Connect with folks who share similar values to you. Having supportive friends or social groups can make a big difference. So can diversified social groups. It's great to have the group of girlfriends you go out with every 2 weeks, but you also have that professional association you're associated with, plus that volunteer group that you work with. These are diverse social groups, each one of them speaking to different values, each one of them giving you different supports to how you want to live your life authentically. Finally, remind yourself that sticking to your values is important and how that looks in the long run. Big picture thinking here to strengthen your commitment to a life that aligns with what you believe in. Sometimes we get so caught up in the moment that we forget that, okay, this relationship we're going to have for a very long time. If I scream at my partner today, next week might not look so great. Next year might not look so great. So moving beyond that momentary flash and looking at the big picture can also help sometimes move you in the direction of aligning with your values. Values are a foundation that make us who we are, part of the foundation that make us who we are. Discovering and living by those values means building a life. It sounds very labor intensive, doesn't it? Building a life that truly represents your authentic self. When challenges arise, use strategies to stay on the path guided by your values. Living true to your values is all about the journey because values change over time. It's not about the destination. Moving on to my next slide. We're into boundaries. I've got a fence there, but you notice there's space between the fence. We'll talk about it. Strong boundary setting is a vital aspect to well-being and relationships. Moving from living authentically and staying true to our values, let's explore the cornerstone of healthy connections here, or a cornerstone of healthy connections. And that's recognizing that boundaries are not just essential to our mental and emotional well-being, but are also a fundamental aspect of healthy relationships. Setting boundaries is like constructing a framework that safeguards your mental and emotional well-being. It's a method to define your limits and safeguard your personal space, not just your physical space, but your personal space mentally and emotionally as well. Have you ever wondered if you needed to form a boundary? It's like, "Ah, I'm not good at this boundary setting. I don't really need them. Everything's fine." I actually hear this with my coaching clients sometimes, and it kind of makes me scratch my head a little bit. If you're unsure whether you need to establish a boundary or not, I encourage you to reflect on the instances where you feel taken advantage of. You feel obligated to do something that you really don't want to do, or you're annoyed by something or someone. These emotions are a good indicator that there might be a boundary that needs to be shored up a little bit, that you need to just hammer a few more nails into to give yourself a little more space. So reflect on those instances where the emotions might be tapping on the door, right? We need a better boundary over here. Okay. Boundaries are a form of self-care. I know it seems silly. By distancing myself from you in this respect, it gives me self-care. Establishing these limits, you're not only taking care of yourself, but fostering a healthy environment for meaningful connections. If I don't feel taken advantage of by you, for example, I'll be more apt to interact with you in a positive way. I'll want to hang out with you, hence our relationship will flourish, right? You're setting boundaries for yourself. So when I set a boundary for myself, it's for me. You set a boundary, it's for you. Boundaries are not rules for someone else to follow. This one, again, with my coaching clients, can be a real head scratcher. You can't treat me that way. That's not a boundary, that's a rule. I won't be treated that way. And if you continue to treat me that way, I'm out of here. That's a boundary. Deciding what I'm going to do with myself, as opposed to you must, you can't, you have to. The challenging part about setting boundaries, however, is that final piece that I know I need one and I've set one. You can't talk to me that way. If you do, I'm going to walk away. It's that final step that can be a little bit tricky. Once you set the boundary, you've got to walk away. You've got to do what you say you're going to do. So multiple layers to establishing boundaries here. Going to jump into another one, and it's the communication of boundaries. Clear communication is crucial to boundary setting. You need to express your needs and limits clearly to others while doing so in a respectful and assertive manner. Not aggressive, assertive. Not rude, strong. Okay. This is not a one and done type thing either. I've communicated my boundary once, they shall forever abide by it. No. There might be some repetition involved here. You might need to repeat your new boundaries several times while other people get used to them, particularly in relationships you've been in a while. When going to visit grandma, we're not going to talk about my weight. I don't want to talk about, how much I weigh or how chunky I'm getting. That relationship with your grandma's been around for a while, as long as you have been alive. Um, so it might take a little while for grandma to get used to those boundaries. Setting boundaries is not about constructing impermeable walls. They're not concrete, 6 feet thick, topped with glass and barbed wire here. It's about establishing a healthy parameter that allows for constructive and respectful interactions. I used the fence image on this slide very deliberately. It's like having a good neighbor. You have a fence between your property and their property, but you still talk over and, you hand over the tomatoes while they give you the cucumbers. You still have a relationship with your neighbor. over and through that fence, but there's still a fence in place. So you still have a boundary to help you define what your relationship is. Make sense? I'm going to assume yes. Consistency. Another thing you want to think about when you're thinking about setting boundaries is making sure that they are consistently enforced. Um, when you're consistent in enforcing your boundaries, it helps other people understand where those limits are. So I'm going to use my grandma example again. So I go visit grandma today and I'm like, Grandma, don't talk about my weight. Tomorrow, I'm like, oh, it doesn't matter. Just let her go on. It's fine. And she talks all about my weight and how I'm getting a little chunky. And then I go visit her the day after and I'm like, oh, Grandma, don't talk about my weight. Now we're sending mixed messages. Okay, so consistency is important. It helps other people understand and respect your boundaries and contributes to a healthier relationship. When there's less confusion, there's less conflict or potential for tension. Finally, I want to talk about flexibility. Always be open to adjusting your boundaries as needed. Life is dynamic. Your needs and values may evolve. Being flexible in your boundaries allows for growth and adaptability in your relationships. Okay, I know I went from consistency to being flexible. How does that work? For example, if I've just lost my mother has just died, and I'm very upset and I'm yelling and I'm just dropping my basket, one of your boundaries is nobody yells at me or I'm out of here. I'm not really yelling at you. I've just lost my mother. I'm in emotional upheaval. This one time, I think we're okay with the yelling. This is a flexible boundary. Life is dynamic. There are different things feeding into the situation. When we're talking about consistency, like grandma, and talking about my weight, it's never okay to talk about my weight. What pant size I choose to wear is up to me. Okay. So boundaries, when crafted with firmness, fairness, and flexibility, become pillars of your well-being, or some of the pillars of your well-being, because there's quite a few. And building blocks to meaningful relationships. Guilt. Oy, guilt. Okay. For some of us, we got a lot more than others. For those of us who don't have a lot, I am envious. So let's shift our topic here to dealing with daily experiences and guilt-free living. Guilt-free living in this context that we're sharing today entails understanding your emotions, navigating your reactions, and recognizing that your emotions serve as powerful messengers, like signals prompting us to pay attention to something. You know, when you put your hand on a hot stove, you get a momentary of pain saying, hey, move your hand, get it off the hot stove. Emotions are very similar. Why do I feel guilty? Oh my gosh, I'm angry. What's causing the alarm to go off? Okay. So let's explore why emotions are not something to get lost in. I'm so angry. I'm always going to be angry, you know, leaving your hand on the hot stove. And not expecting other people to fix how we are feeling. There's a tricky one, eh? I need you to make me feel better. So identifying and accepting our emotions as ours. These are my emotions. I'm choosing to feel this way. I know, don't hang me. When I say that, a lot of people get upset with me. Accepting that emotions are ours to choose to feel is a pivotal step in leading a guilt-free life. It's about being aware of what we feel, and here's the tricky part, and why. What we feel and why. This self-awareness is crucial for making informed decisions, particularly in relationships. So let's have an example scenario so we can grab a hold of this a little tighter here. Let's imagine a situation where you start feeling guilty. Guilt is a strong feeling. I don't know anybody who actually likes the feeling. That pops up when we think we've done something against what we believe is right. So it's against our values, it's against our morals, or we've done something against what others expect or to hurt someone else. So this is where guilt kind of pops up for us. Instead of getting lost in the guilt, consider figuring out why you are feeling guilty. I'm feeling guilty because I missed a deadline. Why am I feeling guilty about that? Well, I made Sally miss her deadline and she got in trouble. That's why I feel guilty. So what am I going to do about it? Am I going to go eat a pint of ice cream and chase it with a bottle of wine? Maybe, probably not the healthiest solution, but I am going to go to Sally and try to make amends. I am going to apologize, right? Figure out why you feel guilty and then make a conscious decision from there. I do want to stress here that it's important to know that the guilty feeling that may come from just being yourself, for taking up space, for just simply existing, is not what guilt is for. You shouldn't feel guilty about simply being who you are. If this is where the guilt is coming from, I'm so stupid, I shouldn't be here. This is time to reach out to trusted friends, trusted mentors, or a therapist. Guilt for being who you are is not what guilt is for. Okay, dramatic pause as I move on. So speaking into guilt, feeling guilty is like a signal that something might be bothering you. You've contravened a value, a moral, you've hurt someone else. And instead of letting that guilt make you feel heavy or down, use it as a signpost to think about the areas where you can grow or make positive changes. It's a guide for better understanding your values, enhancing your boundaries. Yep, here we're connecting them, enhancing our boundaries, and being unapologetically yourself. So, strategies for guilt-free living. Differentiating your emotions. Creating a strong strategy means starting with being able to tell which emotions are yours and which ones are influenced by external factors. For those of us who have mothers who like to use guilt as a tool to get what they want and what they think they need, this would be an external factor for guilt. Okay, so internally generated guilt versus externally generated guilt. This clear understanding gives you the power to deal with and handle your emotions effectively. It helps you recognize which emotions truly belong to you, making them easier to manage and respond to. For example, your mother says, "You never come visit me anymore. I'm so lonely. I'm going to die alone." Okay, time out. Those are your mother's emotions. Let that sink in. Yeah, those are your mother's emotions, and she's communicating them to you. You then have a choice on what to do with that. Are you not living up to your values, that family comes first and you're working too much? Maybe there's an internal impetus for guilt. Make sure you're understanding what's coming from the inside and what's being influenced from the outside. Next, navigate your reaction. When managing your responses, prioritize thoughtful actions over impulsive reactions. Sin in haste, repent in leisure kind of moment here. Okay, mom, I'll come visit you every day next week. It'll all be fine. Don't worry about it. And now you're facing a week where every day you've got to go visit your mom no matter what happens because you said you would. This is an impulsive reaction to the guilt response. Okay, as opposed to thoughtful actions. Mom, I know you're really lonely. I will come on Wednesday and I'm going to call my sister, see if she can't come another day this week, but there's lots of stuff going on. Does this help move us forward? Okay, so there's different actions and reactions that can play in here. Cultivate the habit of taking a moment to pause and carefully select your response, especially in emotionally charged situations. When you feel your heart pounding, your guts twisting up, you break out into a little bit of a sweat. It's time to hit the pause button for a minute. Just going to think about this for a second before I dive right in with both feet. This deliberate approach empowers you to retain control over your actions and steer the course of the interaction with purpose and composure. We've all seen those people who can seem to manage stress really, really well, and they respond well. Hit that pause button, let the emotions flow, and then choose the best response. Lastly, self-compassion. Embrace the practice of self-compassion. Yes, your mother wants you to visit her every day next week, but do you have the capacity to do that? Do you have the time? Do you have the energy? Do you have the emotional reserves? Self-compassion says, maybe not. Maybe I can only go on Wednesday. Okay. Recognize that making mistakes is also a natural part of the human experience. And the feelings of guilt associated with making an error do not determine your inherent worth. You're a valuable human being with mistakes and without mistakes and everything in between. Just because you make a mistake doesn't mean your value goes down, because this can sometimes be triggered by that guilt reflex. So rather than fixating on guilt, view it as a chance for personal growth and positive transformation. If you've made a mistake, recognize it, sincerely apologize. I encourage you to take a look at the recorded Lunch and Learn, The Art of the Apology, and then make constructive amends for it. So those are the three tops from that Lunch and Learn, but I encourage you to take a look if you want to learn more about apologies. The adoption of self-compassion nurtures a mindset that fosters continual learning and thereby fosters resilience, promoting a more robust and adaptive approach to life's challenges. As opposed to getting stuck like flypaper, you can flow through and move through as you grow and learn. Guilt-free living is not about avoiding emotions, but understanding and using them as a tool for growth. As we continue our journey to live authentically with unwavering kindness, remember that emotions are messengers guiding us toward a life more aligned with our true selves. They're just smoke signals. That's it. Okay. Last major slide before we go into the key takeaways, we're jumping into kindness. This involves finding the delicate balance between assertiveness for what we want and need and empathy for the other person in our interactions. A balance that allows us to express our needs and boundaries while remaining empathetic and considerate of another person's feelings and perspectives. Finding this balance is crucial. It allows us to express our needs while maintaining an empathetic perspective on the relationship, giving the other person space to express their wants, needs, and boundaries as well. I encourage you to consider a situation where you needed to communicate a boundary. I'll give you a second to think about it. You got it? Kind of. Now consider these steps when putting up, there's the words, when putting up your boundary. Number 1, express your thoughts clearly. Okay. Communicate your thoughts and needs using I statements and avoid vague language. Well, I kind of want you to show up more for me. What does that mean? I'm not sure. I need you to be there on Tuesday night to show support during the parent-teacher conferences. Aha. Very specific, okay? Maintain open body language. Use open and welcoming body language to convey approachability and avoid defensive postures. We all know the person who sits there with their arms crossed and their shoulders in their ears. Yeah, not open, hard to talk to. Calm tone of voice. Speak in a calm, composed tone to keep the conversation respectful and help the other person mirror back. That's a great thing about social interactions. We can hype each other up with our body language and tone of voice and how we come across, or we can keep things calm. Just think of the last time you were in an argument and somebody lost their minds. It was very hard to stay calm, yeah? Avoid raising your voice or using aggressive language. And that includes name calling, not usually great for building relationships. Active listening, make sure you're giving your full attention to the speaker. Put down your phone, go to a private area, and reflect on what's being said before responding to show your empathy. When I was in my coaching training, one of the best tips I took away for active listening is count to 7 slowly before responding. Once someone says something to you, count to 7 to give them space to elaborate and yourself to think. 7 seconds is longer than you think. It is. It was hard in the beginning. Respond with empathy, considering the other person's perspective, and this includes acknowledging their feelings and concerns, even when you're asserting your own boundary. Okay. Positive reinforcement, acknowledge and appreciate positive behavior and encourage cooperation. I know this situation is really, really emotional for you. I appreciate that you're coming to me with such respect and staying really calm. That really helps me engage here. Acknowledge and appreciate positive behavior and reinforce your commitment to a positive and collaborative relationship. I really want to keep working on this project with you. I really want to get to the next level. How do we do that? And finally, remain solution oriented while seeking understanding. Keep the conversation focused on finding solutions rather than dwelling on problems. Maintain the momentum in the conversation. So, in short, unapologetic kindness is a formidable strength, allowing us to navigate relationships with both strength and heart. As we wrap up this segment on kindness, remember to carry forward principles of finding balance, being firm yet compassionate, and embracing unapologetic kindness in your interactions. To sum up the key takeaways for today, as we're just over the half-hour mark, number 1, authentic living. Understand your values. Identify and clarify your values, the guiding principles that can shape your behavior, and align your interactions with these identified values, promoting authenticity and purpose in your life. Healthy boundaries for well-being. Establish clear boundaries to safeguard your mental and emotional well-being, and view those boundaries as a form of self-care, creating a healthy environment for meaningful relationships. And last, and in there also effective communication, not lastly, effective communication is also in there. Communicate your needs and limits assertively and respectively, understanding that your boundaries are not walls, but they're like neighbors talking over a fence. Okay. Emotions. Identify and understand your emotions, using them as a messaging system for personal growth. Remember, strategies for guilt-free living involve differentiating between internal and external emotions, those that people want you to feel and those that you feel yourself, and responding thoughtfully. Finding, of course, that balance between empathy and assertiveness in your interaction, and practicing firmness with compassion to enhance your relationships. So those are my 3 key takeaways for today.